Okay, so today we're looking at how to shim a PRM 160 gearbox. Now this is the same as doing a 260, and what we've got to get it down to is we've got to get it down to a shim clearance or an end float clearance of 0.05 millimeters, which to be fair is an absolute pig to do. Now then, your shim kit, mine came from ASCP Supplies, comes with two types of shim. This one, which is about 1/4 of a millimeter, and then there's the thinner one. This is an old version of one, but which is 0.04 of a millimeter. Now, my method of doing this is to get it roughly right with plastic gauge first. I'm sure you know this stuff. Basically, you can get it off eBay. It's little thin bits of wax, like so, and all you do is you put it in, squeeze it down, and then from how flat it gets, you then read off this what size you've got, or what clearance you've got. So I nick a bit of plastic gauge over once I've got it. I think I'm roughly right. Little tag of plastic gauge on all four sort of sides of that. Drop it in, and then torque the bearing cover back down again. Now, what we're doing here is, you'll notice we've removed the O-rings and stuff, so these things can be put in and out quickly and easily. So we'll drop that in like that, and then we'll screw down the bolts. Sorry, which are there. Now, I have to say, this is actually quite difficult to do, and it takes quite a lot of time to get it right. You'll find that there's quite a lot of spring in this, because the other end of, not this one, not the main shaft, this is actually the output shaft, but on the input and the idler for the reverse, you're going to find that the circlip at the other end has got quite a bit of spring in it. So you actually need to take up quite a lot of that spring with your shims. Anyway, so we'll tighten this down, and what you do, you don't need to tighten it down too much, you just need to, with your 9/16 socket, yeah, I know this isn't a 9/16 socket, but nick it down, one, not too tight, because you're not really looking at howling it in, 1, 2, and then all three down evenly, and then back off again. Now, the plastic gauge will then have squeezed, and you can read off where you're at with your shims. Now, after I've done this, I then like to check it, and I'll show you how to do that. Hang on, I'll just take these out. 1, 2, 3. Need an air ratchet, really. That comes out. If you've any idea how long these things take to upload to YouTube, you know why I'm trying to rush it. Okay, and off that comes. And then pick out your shim with your plastic gauge on it. Hang on, says he. One there. There he is. Turn him over. Obviously peel off the little baby one that's attached itself to it. Peel it off. Hang on. Technical difficulties, viewers. I'll just move those two. There we are. Separate them. Excuse the blank screen. It's a shim. There we go. Right, okay, so we've got the plastic gauge, and you can actually see clearly now how it has squeezed that out. Now, we're looking for 0.05, which is that one there. And you can take a rough average. You'll see that that is around 0.063 of a millimeter. So I could probably do is shimming that down a little bit more, but I'm not going to do that. I'll make you suffer it. That one's closer to your 0.005. They actually say that you should go anywhere between 0 and 0.05 millimeters. Honestly, go 0.05, because if you go 0, you like to overheat and burn the bearing. So there, it looks to me, and one thing you can do is this: you can go, I'm at 0.063. Take your oh God, I need the hands up. Right. Take your gauge, and you can then add in another shim to get you to your correct spot, and that is 0.02 inches, sorry. Wrong. 0.05. So 0.5 plus 6.3 brings me pretty much where I want to be. Anyway, right, irrelevant. So you get the idea from that. The plastic gauge gives you a good idea, but don't try and squeeze it down much lower. This is the red plastic gauge. Don't try and squeeze it down much lower than that, because it just squishes out the edges. It's not really designed for this. Okay, so what you do then, to check you're right, okay, what we'll do, we'll just launch that lot back in, like so. And what we'll do is, I'll just scrape off, well I won't in this case, we'll just launch that back in. I'm just putting a new shim in instead of the plastic gauged one. So that brings me back to how I was, which was showing me on that 0.063. So what you do is you add in this case we're going to add in another 1/4 of a millimetre, which is another main shim. So what you do is you basically over shim it, add in another shim. So just launch that in. Then what you do is you stick your bearing top back on, like so, crank it down, and just check with a feeler gauge that, obviously you put your bolts in, but I'm not going to bore you with that. You check with your feeler gauge that you've got the correct reading here. So what you do is you should have, if you're at 0, you'd have 1/4 of a millimetre on the feeler gauge. But what I'm going to do is, if you were shimmed to 0, you'd have 1/4 of a millimetre showing. But obviously we've got 1/4 plus 0.063 of a millimetre at the moment, so you can just check it that way. Now the other two are infinitely more difficult. My best suggestion on that is to not run, because it's so much narrower, the bearing cage here. My honest suggestion is to not to take the plastic gauge too far down. The reason being, plastic gauge is designed to go the full length, and what tends to happen here is, as well as squeezing sideways, it squeezes out the front ways. So I'd come down somewhere in the region of 0.1 of a millimetre, maybe 0.76 of a millimetre on the plastic gauge, and then I'd shim it from there. But at the end of the day, this isn't an easy thing to do, and to be honest, this gearbox has perfect bearings in it, and it was run with some bits of Coke can as shims for 8 years. And it actually had a wobble on the, obviously that wobbles now because it's not bolted, but it had a wobble on the end shaft, so it doesn't, I don't think it matters that much, but it does take out your lip seal shaft if you're not careful. So there we are. Don't forget to get your oil pump the right way around when you put it on. You'll know you're right because it covers part of that there. Right, hope that helps, and look out for other guides.